Digression is clearly quite a big part of how I express my political thoughts on this YouTube channel. Yesterday, I rambled for 20 minutes, maybe more, about the Labour Party, and I was trying to put across a point about there being three factions within the Labour Party, and I looked back at the video and I think I only got to one. So in order to clear up, I'll try and be brief about what I meant yesterday. In the video, which, despite having recorded it yesterday, only uploaded it at about 7 o'clock this morning. So whether this one does or not, who knows? I digress. So in Labour, there are essentially three sides. Oh, you could argue there are more, but there are three influential sides in the party which have a number of MPs on them. You have those who are just against Corbyn because they don't like his leadership, mostly Blairites, most of them Remainers. I mean, yeah, that's probably the largest part of the Labour Party, because they haven't managed to plonk in many momentum MPs just yet. They will, give them time. So you have a very large group of Blairite Remainers who do not like the direction the Labour Party is going in with regards to Brexit or its spending or any other thing, economic policy, whatever. And then you have people who have been Blairites in the past, and I only know one, and I said Caroline Flint yesterday. I said her name more times than I really care to remember. But Caroline Flint, because she was on the news at the weekend, is a good case in point. There are others who have historically been Blairites, but now, as I said before, are concerned with the electoral credibility of their seats against huge swathes of Leave voting Labour supporters. So they have recognised this, and they are essentially Blairite Brexiteers who want to make it look like they respect the vote to leave. And then you have essentially the Corbyn bunch, who are more or less not Remain or Leave, but just disruption of the government, which is understandable as the opposition, but at the same time ridiculous, because they don't know what they want and they can't work out one policy, which is what arguably makes Labour so irrelevant in the Brexit negotiations. Even though, I need to turn that down, shut up. Even though there's an ever increasing risk that Labour win an election and are able to form a government, up until the moment an election is called, Labour's relevance will continue to be considerably lower than that of the DUP and the Conservative Party as a whole, because they can't make their mind up. The only thing they are set on is trying to topple this government, and it muddies the vision that they have for Brexit, and no one knows what they want. They put out an idea one day, everyone looks at it and says, well, that's cherry picking. They put out another idea the other day, next day, it says, well, that's cherry picking as well. So that is it. That's essentially what I think of the Labour Party at the moment. I will be coming back to the Labour Party shortly. I have something to say about John McDonnell, who in the news article today has made some fairly worrying, scary comments. But that's for later. So we're back on Saudi Arabia, and with the US Secretary of State, he flew firstly to Saudi Arabia and then to Turkey. And clearly, when he flew to Saudi Arabia, it's blindingly obvious the United States' main goal was to concoct a story which they knew no one would believe, but was remotely conceivable, that would get Saudi Arabia off the international hook and get back to America not having to justify selling them weapons. And that is where we are at today. We had the most ludicrous story that you could probably think of, which is that despite Saudi Arabia funding and flying a whole group of people out to this consulate on private jets, or jets paid for by the Saudi government, with not countless, but a lot of people with connections to the Crown Prince, and I think one or two with connections to the King, arrive in this consulate, embassy, whatever it is, and torture this journalist. And apparently the official story seems to be now that this entire operation was totally rogue. Every person involved in it and the entire consulate was rogue, was not following, or was not going, sorry, I'll rephrase that, was going against the wishes or against the knowledge of the Saudi royal family and the government, and proceeded to torture and execute this journalist. So we have state-funded operation which supposedly was carried out without official state consensus, which resulted in the murder of not a left-wing, not a liberal, not someone who has just been against every single thing that Saudi Arabia has done in its country. But this guy was a conservative. This person would occasionally support what the Saudi government does. And he spoke out against them, and they lured him to the consulate, the embassy, whatever, tortured him, and then disposed of him by chopping him up. And the US, Donald Trump, wants to brush this under the carpet with a bullshit story that this was just a bunch of rogues. And you could see it coming when the moment he said rogue to the press, after having a phone call with the Prince or the King or whatever. And all this is to bury the story under the carpet so that the rest of the world can move on and forget about what Saudi Arabia has done. And on the radio this morning, somewhere, can't remember where, on Radio 4, probably the Today programme, one of the reporters said almost word for word what I had said in my video of what was meant to be yesterday, but turns out to be this morning. That, I can't remember what I said now, I've forgotten, whatever, but they flew there, they wanted to make a story which got them off the hook, made it look like it was possibly nothing to do with the Saudi government, and continued business as usual. Now, it might not be completely business as usual, but if the government lets a country off the hook for a crime like this, debatable whether it's technically a crime in their own country, who knows, but if the government lets them off the hook, businesses will eventually just creep back in, and it will be completely business, business is the important word, business as usual. Now, there's that. So, I've forgotten what I was going to say. I've been rambling 9 minutes. At least I didn't digress from the Labour Party. But, what was I going to say? Anyway, so I'm still recording this from the iPad. I'm doing it live because when I recorded a video yesterday on the iPad, excuse me, it took 9 hours for it to upload. So I'm going with this theory, and I have no idea how accurate it is, that this will upload faster because it's already saving it somewhere in the cloud. Who knows? So that's Saudi Arabia. There was something else I was going to say on that. If I think about it, I will casually bring it up and digress off whatever is the next thing I'm talking about. So the other thing is, at the moment, again, Brexit. Now, Theresa May she gave some statement to the House of Commons yesterday, and she's been addressing the EU, addressing the Commission, the other leaders, God knows who else is probably unelected, no one knows the name of, but has huge amounts of power. That's how the European Union works. Always has done, always will do. Just in a couple of years' time, it won't have people with British sounding names in it. That's all that will be the case. She's been over there, and it seems to be coming out that she will possibly consider extending, and they call it a backstop to the backstop, extending the backstop, or essentially, to all intents and purposes, the transition, so that there is no border put up between the UK and Ireland. Now, when Chequers, and bear in mind, no one in the government or no one official is calling this Chequers now. The word Chequers has been completely wiped off. They're calling it, I don't even know what they're calling it. Who cares? Chequers, her, whatever. And when they announced this thing at Chequers, this was supposed to be the deal. This was basically take it or leave it. This is what we think. The ball's in the European Union's court. We're waiting for them. We can't move anymore. We don't want to move anymore. Ireland, Northern Ireland, blah, blah, blah. We can't move anymore. European Union, it's all down to you. And we're going to try and put the blame on you. Well, that works for a while. It worked for a month. How long has it been since Chequers? I don't know. A month, 2 months, whatever. And yeah, there you go. Breaking news. I'll get to that in a sec. Anyway, she has already started to hint that she will concede something else. She will kick Brexit, kick the transition, kick the issue of the border slightly further into the long grass in exactly the same way she has done for the last 2 years. When she became Prime Minister, everyone thought, okay, let's give her some time. And they met, and we conceded off the bat without any hassle or without any negotiating almost whatsoever. We said, okay, here you go. Here's 38 billion. Now let's negotiate some real things and let's get a good deal. 38 billion, I think it was. It wasn't 40 billion. I have a feeling it was 38 billion pounds. We said, right, here you go. 38 billion straight away. Now we're going to get a good deal. You give us a good deal, we'll give you 38 billion. Every single time a deadline has come up, she has wrangled her way into agreeing something to kick it into the long grass, and I'm not even sure she's doing it because she just wants to stay Prime Minister. I think she's doing it because she can't actually leave as Prime Minister. There is no one to replace her. No one will let her go. She is essentially hostage, and as much as I hate to say it, Labour and the Liberal Democrats and probably the SNP, everyone apart from the Conservative Party has said in the media day in, day out, Theresa May is a hostage to her own party, and never more so is the case than the amount of times she has kicked this into the long grass because she cannot get any type of deal that will please. I never mind both sides of a party, or never mind, sorry, the other way around, that will please both sides in the House of Commons, the Labour and the Conservatives, but she can't even get something that pleases both sides of the Conservative Party. So, what seems to have happened is she seems to have hinted, and I don't know quite the official what happened, whatever, but she's essentially once again tried, and maybe this suggests that it hasn't. So I'll say what I was understanding at first, and then I'll read this breaking news, which is just cropped up. She's kicked it into the long grass. She's kicked Northern Ireland down the road again, and this will just carry on, and we'll either have essentially a pause in us leaving, or we won't leave at all, and it'll just go on and on and on. The thing which has been holding it up has been this so-called backstop that they agreed in the past, months and months ago, possibly even last year, which no one thought was, you can't enforce it. It's a pile of crap in the first place. The backstop is basically, if there's no deal, well, we'll stay in the customs union because for the sake of Northern Ireland and the border. And obviously, the UK's intention is to leave the customs union, and so at some point, that backstop will have to be thrown out of the window. And what's happened is, they kicked that into the long grass, and now the grass has been mowed. They found the ball, too many metaphors, and they have to kick it again, otherwise they get disqualified or some crap like that, whatever it is. You use whatever metaphors you want. That's the fact. And all they have done is create supposedly a backstop to a backstop. They've said this backstop needs to end at some point. It essentially boils down to this, and I know I'm rambling. When Britain leaves and we leave the customs union, there needs to be something that prevents a customs union or a lack of customs union on the border of Northern Ireland from forcing walls and a border to be built. So this is what they've been saying, a backstop to a backstop. Well, and Britain wants to say commit for the sake of its own people who voted leave and everyone else who's just sick to bloody death of the thing. Britain wants to say, excuse me, that we will leave the customs union on X date. Now, the EU says, well, you can't do that because then you have ruined the agreement of the backstop. So the EU says, in order not to ruin the agreement of the backstop, you need to have a backstop to the backstop, which is essentially, one way or another, keep the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland free, active, open, whatever. So, and Britain says, well, no, we can't do that. So the European Union has turned around and said, well, you have to, otherwise the backstop isn't enforced, or the backstop's not there, and we agree to backstop, so therefore you need a backstop to a backstop. And it's a no-win situation. This type of ridiculous argument isn't going to get anywhere. So that's essentially what is happening up to now. So I'm going to read this out, because the headline, this is fairly significant, I think, because I thought with Theresa May's concession, there may be another summit, and this was the thing they said, the EU basically said, we need to agree something, otherwise there's no additional summit in November. So Sky News, and there's no actual news of it apart from the headline. Faisal Islam. So, okay, the political editor of Sky News seems to be, apparently, according to Sky's tweeting, that an EU source says not enough progress. For now, the EU 27 is not planning to organise an extraordinary, what's extraordinary about it, summit on Brexit in November. So whatever. So this is just okay. So there's no extra summit. So they clearly didn't agree on a backstop to the backstop, which kind of makes sense because Britain would never technically, verbally or in writing agree to a backstop to the backstop because they want to get out of the single market. So apparently the EU says they are ready to meet again when decisive progress has been made. Not enough progress has been achieved, and the EU27 reaffirmed full confidence in Michel Barnier as the negotiator and their determination to stay united. And that's an interesting. It's interesting that the EU27, the leaders of the other 27 countries, have had to make that statement. Reaffirm full confidence in Michel Barnier as the negotiator, because there had been a lot of reports that the EU were getting extremely pissed off. The member countries were getting extremely pissed off that there was no deal or that there was no progress because the EU, the countries themselves, do not want it. Frankly, the Commission doesn't care that much because they're not elected. This is it. It boils down to it. The Commission and the negotiating team are not a bunch of elected people. There is no accountability to them. If it all goes tits up and the British and European economies crash through the floor, well, these people in the Commission, they sit there with their great pensions, all the perks of their stupid jobs in a ridiculous institution. They don't care. They're not elected. There is no jeopardy to their jobs whatsoever. Possibly Michel Barnier, but let's face it, he'll have a pension lined up. He doesn't care. He might want that much. Anyway, he's the only one whose head might roll if it doesn't go tits up, and maybe he will. But the rest of the Commission don't care. If they have to, if someone's head has to roll, the Commission will be delighted as Michel Barnier's. But the Commission doesn't. There are no consequences to the European Commission. This is one of the problems. You can't elect these people. We only know who half of them are because of Brexit and because it's been reported in the UK media. These people aren't elected. So I could carry on about this. I'm not terribly sure I've really made any new points today. There's one last thing, and I won't dwell on it for too long because I've been going on about this for ages. So the fact that increasingly there seems to be zero progress being made now with Brexit, the negotiations, and the deal, Theresa May's deal, is coming closer and closer to completely dying out. And in recent days, if you look at various news sources, Channel 4, Sky, BBC, Independent, and The Telegraph, quiet rumblings from certain cabinet ministers about the need to get a deal or the need for certain things to happen suggest to me that very soon, in the next couple of weeks, there will be quite possibly a few more cabinet resignations from people who have just been so sick to death of the mess which even Theresa May now can't clear up or can't kick into the long grass much longer. The mess that she has created almost single-handedly, but the rest of her party are just to blame. There will be, I predict, cabinet resignations within the next 2 weeks if something big, something which the government can say, look here, we have this is brilliant, this is our ticket to a good deal, this is our ticket to leaving on good terms. If she does not come back with something good like that, and it has to be really damn good now at this late stage, people will be resigning and she'll be under more and more pressure. She'll be under more and more pressure to say, sod it, no deal. That's the end. And I think that's what needs to happen. I wish it wasn't what needs to happen, but we're in this situation. And here's an interesting thing. Since the financial crash, and I don't know the figures for the whole year, or since 2008 for the last 10 years, but when we had huge numbers of net migration, we had fairly high inflation with very, very little wage growth. Average wage rises in average earnings did not keep up almost the entire 10 years, with inflation as a result. And even when inflation was low, earnings were so marginal that essentially since 2008, most people who are not earning vast sums of money have had their quality of life reduced quite drastically. And in the last few months in a row, and I'm not sure how much it plays a part, but it's interesting to know, as we approach leaving the European Union in one way or another, crashing out or halfway staying in, but us stomping our feet on the floor, saying whatever we're saying, I'm not making much sense today. Whether we stay in, fully in, half in, or out, or crashing out, the migration, oh for God's sake, I don't know what net migration has done, but average wage growth has increased faster than inflation for, I think now, a few months in a row, and that is a trend we have not seen since before 2008. And it's very interesting, despite all the warnings from people all the time about the risk to the economy, the risk to jobs, things like that. And what are we seeing? We are seeing average wages go up faster than inflation. So that's an interesting thing. Left-wing media are reporting. The Independent hasn't said anything about that. The Guardian, I haven't looked at the Guardian for that specifically, hasn't said anything. So, that's Brexit. I'm not going to ramble on too much. John McDonnell, and I'm going to read this. This is for someone who is the Shadow Chancellor. This is ridiculous. I'll find it now and I'm going to read it out. People have accused Jeremy Corbyn for a long time of essentially supporting the IRA and undermining the unity of the United Kingdom for decades. And he's been accused of that, and so have most of his people he's surrounded himself with. And no finer example, where is it, than John McDonnell, which I now can't find. Where is the damn thing? I'm going to read this out, it must be at the top. Forgive me. Oh, for Christ's sake, where is it? Right, I'm going to search for it. So, John McDonnell, somewhere, I think outside Parliament, and I will look this up, has essentially been saying to the media that he still longs for a united Ireland. Now, I don't know, I can't think of many glaring examples of conflicts of interest. And the entire criticism of Jeremy Corbyn, the entire time he's been leader, I've always been hesitant to say that someone is not fit to run this country. I may fundamentally disagree with him, for example, on nuclear weapons, on the way he wants to handle the economy, and God knows many other things. Okay, and I've always tried to stay away from saying that he is unfit to be Prime Minister. He has radical views. That's no secret. I'm still looking for this John. I will find it. This John McDonnell thing. He has radical views. they would drastically change the landscape of this country, and not necessarily for the better. And nationalising railways would simply cost money. It wouldn't damage the independence or the unity of the country. He would, most of his economic policies would not necessarily damage the unity of the United Kingdom. Being against nuclear weapons, well, it'd be bad for security, yeah. But he's not. In fact, actually, it'd be Labour Scotland. Sorry, in Scotland would be more likely to stay in the UK, even if we leave, when they have someone like Jeremy Corbyn, I think, running the UK. So actually, Jeremy Corbyn would probably be a unifying factor for Scotland, and yet a divisive factor for Northern Ireland. So he's not. Some things he doesn't necessarily believe in the breakup, or rather, what am I trying to say? This is the problem with live streaming. You get 10 minutes of god awful crap where I'm not actually saying anything. I have not said before that Jeremy Corbyn is unfit to be Prime Minister. I would not casually say that, in the same way that many other right-wing and conservative people, and even some Labour MPs have said in the past. You cannot simply dismiss him just because he's radical and left-wing. And with that said, I'm going to find this sodding John McDonnell bloody article. United Ireland. Sky News. Here we go. John McDonnell has risked antagonising the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland by declaring that he longs for a united Ireland. So Chancellor reaffirmed his pro-Republican views as he warned against Brexit negotiations damaging the Good Friday Agreement. Mr. McDonnell, this is from Sky News by the way, Mr. McDonnell, speaking to political journalists at Westminster, said in response to a question, "You know my background, I'm a Republican. I long for a united Ireland, but I recognise democracy." Debatable. Ireland will not be reunited on the basis of some contortion in the relationship with the EU. It will only be reunited on the basis of some... Sorry, I've read the same bit. It will only be reunited on the basis of the popular support of the Irish people. That's what I respect. And I'll give him credit for this because he doesn't credit Tony Blair with much. But it goes on to say the veteran left winger, who was a serial rebel during Tony Blair's government from 1997 to 2007, also paid a rare tribute to Blair for negotiating the Good Friday Agreement. And this is funny. "I say this about Tony Blair," he said. "I was a critic of his on Iraq and a whole range of other issues, but if he'd stopped at Northern Ireland, he'd have gone down in history as one of the most significant prime ministers in our history." He says history twice. To bring about peace in Northern Ireland in that way was a huge achievement, and I'll always respect him for that. So, firstly, most of the work was done by John Major. Tony Blair was simply politically and electorally convenient at the time to take the credit. Most of the work had been done in the early 90s and mid-90s. And yeah, there was still some work to do, and I'm not saying Tony Blair should not be praised for the work that him and his government and people around him did, but a lot of the foundations to the Good Friday Agreement were done and started by John Major's government. So, getting back, aside from that, John McDonnell has essentially said that he still longs for a united Ireland. Now, I get back to what I was saying. as far as I can remember, I've never said Jeremy Corbyn or anyone in this government is fundamentally unfit to be in the government position that they would be in if they won a general election. But surely the role of the government is to keep national unity, retain a country which it presides over, the unity of that country. And that means not breaking up or not having any, you could argue, beliefs. I don't like criticising beliefs and saying that beliefs make people unfit for certain things, but if you believe Northern Ireland should be part of Ireland, how can you really be fit to be in a government where you have influence over that? How can you be fit for a government in which one of its main primary roles is to retain the unity of the country? You can't. It doesn't work. You can't have someone like John McDonnell be in a government which one of its roles is to keep all parts of the UK united politically, economically, whatever you want, and actually be fundamentally against one of those parts of that country being part of that country. That does not work. I don't have anything more to say to that. That is essentially, this was not going to be a long piece on John McDonnell, but this is the first time I will say John McDonnell, for declaring that he is still a Republican, wanting Northern Ireland to be part of Ireland. John McDonnell has made himself unfit to be in any government of the United Kingdom whatsoever. There you go. Right. I'm just going to cancel. I'm just going to stop this live stream now. This has not been a particularly great live stream. I apologise. My laptop. That reminds me. I got a phone call saying my laptop is ready to be picked up. I was not able to pick it up this evening. I will go and pick it up tomorrow. And so maybe tomorrow I will be able to edit videos properly. And I might even put my crappy little introduction back into the video. Having said that, this is actually not a bad way to record it, so I might make use of the iPad in the future. This has worked to some extent, but it would defeat the purpose of requiring that camera, so maybe not. Anyway, thank you for watching. There's clearly currently 0 views, which is not a record because it's probably consistent with the last live stream, even though by the end of it there were a few people watching. So my apologies for my ramblings. I would say it's late, but I think I've recorded other videos later than this. They are my thoughts, unedited thoughts, sadly, due to 38-minute long video, unedited thoughts on the Labour Party, Saudi Arabia, Brexit in general, and a quick one about John McDonnell. Thank you for watching. I'll make some more videos. Who knows, might even make one tomorrow when I got my laptop back. Possibly, we'll see. Or maybe it'll take me another 2 days to edit it. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll make another one soon. What do? I don't even know how to turn the damn thing off.